Welcome to the Healing Practice Podcast, a space for navigating the natural seasons of womanhood and personal growth. Hosted by Claire Cleaver, author, counsellor, and practitioner, this podcast explores the key stages of womanhood, from the first bloom of puberty, through fertility and birth, to the powerful transition of perimenopause and menopause. Drawing on years of experience supporting women and families, Claire shares practical insights and reflective tools designed to restore balance, release what's been held, and support emotional and physical well-being. This podcast is about listening, understanding, and walking your path with greater clarity and compassion. Wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome here.
Most women are living at a pace dictated by external clocks. And you know straight away what those clocks are. So work, your family, social expectations, all of those things. And this podcast is looking at how we can reconnect more with our inner rhythm. And the first part of that is how to reclaim your true pace. And it's not just about time management. Of course it is, but it's more than that. More an act of deep self-compassion and somatic healing. So those two ideas might seem a bit far stretched, but really that's how we get to connect with our own inner rhythm. And forever, we've been taught that keeping up is the only way to belong to the society that we belong to. But our bodies have a completely different tempo than the world around us. And so what if your exhaustion is not a sign of failure, but really a signal that you've lost the frequency of your own rhythm? And so today we're going to stop talking about how to live at this fast pace, but more about how to stop fighting this clock, all of these external clocks, and to start listening to the innate intelligence of your own pace. So the first part of that is how to listen to your own rhythm. And so the difference between clock time and body time. And we know all of that. We know that in order to get on with our day, we set our clock, we set our alarm clock in order to get up and then complete all the different tasks. And so sometimes we don't need a clock because our body time sets itself to what our clock time is. So that's one way in which we have gotten into our day. And that's a good thing to do. But there are times when we need to ignore clock time and listen within in terms of our body time. So let's look how we would do that. One of the first ways is to identify the quieter signals. And the interesting thing about coming back to ourselves, it's always about the quiet signals, the signals that we've just learned over the years to disregard, to ignore. So, the quiet messaging, the whispering, all of those things that we now hear about in relation to how do we come home to ourselves. And so again, this is another reference to that, the quiet signals. So how do you sense your rhythm through the body? And the most obvious ones are the way in which you breathe. When you breathe in response or in reaction to something that's happened, some task that you need to push yourself through. And where does that tension, for instance, the breath sit in your body? Tension on the jaw, shoulders, those are all old ones that we all know about. And then, of course, stuff that's going on in our gut, the second brain, as we now know it to be called. So these are all important things to reflect on, to listen to, and often people call them intuition. Really, intuition is just that sense of inner listening. And that's what you're doing when you're identifying the quiet signals that are going on in your body. And so we move to the seasonal woman. And the weird and wonderful thing is that we really do know what seasons are, and we adjust ourselves accordingly. And we hear this in terms of the fashion world, the spring wardrobe, what every woman needs for her spring wardrobe, her trans-seasonal wardrobe, and so on. Autumn, getting ready for winter. So we're very aware of what the seasons bring to us in terms of our wardrobe. But there's more to it than that. And when we talk about our rhythm, it isn't a static thing. It is constantly changing based on the seasons of nature, which we know about, and also our hormonal season in terms of where we are in that whole wonderful timeline of our lives, from first bloom right through to the blooming end, those wonderful stages, and of course our life stage. So the more we are alert and alive to those seasonal changes, the more we understand what our rhythm is like. And that's a good thing. And it feels really empowering, I suppose, for want of a better word. I can't think of quite the right word to use. But that sense of coming home to yourself when you realize that you are in tune with your own internal rhythm. And again, what helps you find that internal rhythm is the role of stillness. And the words that come to mind, these are specific words, still touch, for instance, and mindful presence. I like these words because there's a lot in them. And just the very words themselves remind us that it's important to be still. And the mindful presence, which relates to us, our mindful presence within, and then how we interrelate, if you like, to the world around us, particularly the natural world. So when we understand more about how stillness, the role of stillness, can support us finding our rhythm in all of these things that we need to do in terms of reconnecting with your inner rhythm, it makes so much sense. And these are the little supports that you can have around you, cues, if you like, to come back. Again, it's all about coming back to that sense of you, who you are, what your body is telling you, where you need to be moving through, and how to do that with mindful presence. And an easy way to, I guess, be in the mindful presence, now that I'm an expert at Tai Chi, after only having done 2 classes. But it's very interesting the number of people who have done Tai Chi and really do recognize the value of that grounded presence. And if you haven't done Tai Chi or are not even thinking that you'll do it, nonetheless, come back to the very basic principle, which is to stand on your feet. They have to be pretty much parallel. And the reason for that is that once your feet are in parallel position, then your knees are lined up, your hips are lined up, and there is this wonderful sense of alignment in your body. And with your feet on the ground, your toes spread, there is that sense of stillness that you can have, soft belly, soft knees, that lovely uprightness and alignment helps you absorb and create this mindful presence that you are giving to yourself. It's quite powerful. And again, it's another example of what still touch is doing and how you are creating that and making that happen. And so that's now one of my go-tos, and I love it. So that brings us to the next point in terms of energy mapping. And energy mapping I like that. It's very conceptual. How does one map their energy? And there are different ways of doing that. Vital points is, of course, to read your own patterns. What is your energy doing? And ways in which to explain that would be like reading the patterns of your day. How do you get on in your day? How is your day going? How is it progressing? And where are the flows in your day? and where are the leaks. So very kind of water flow. And when we think of water, water naturally falls to the lowest point. And so in terms of our bodies, when we sit for hours, fluid just sits. Well, it doesn't sit at the bottom because obviously our heart is pumping the fluid through our bodies in terms of our blood vessels, in terms of our lymphatic vessels. So there is movement going on. But nonetheless, excessive sitting does dull things down pretty much from the waist down. So therefore, it's important to really look at how you are mapping the energy patterns of your day and to make sure you're getting enough uptime, moving around, completing your task, being excited about that, having a break before you move on into your next task. So enjoying the flow, but where are the leaks? And the leaks are likely to occur when you're sitting for too long. So that's something that you need to consider. And then we look at the innate intelligence of energy, and innate just means internal, related to self. And I think that's a great expression because energy is a resource that we constantly make. And it's important to look at how we renew that and rebalance that. So if we sit for long hours, and I don't need to bore you with how long we sit because we all know what that looks like. But the important thing is, how do we rebalance and renew ourselves, our energy in particular? Because it's very much tapped into the energy flows of the day and those low points. Sleep is the obvious way in which we renew our energy resource. And in sleep, all our vital systems, because we're a complex organism of many systems inside of us, our reproductive system, our digestive system, alimentary, circulatory system, all of those systems all need that vital restoration at the end of the day, which happens while we sleep. And so it's important for us to respect and to take care of our energy and that innate intelligence that our body has, because so often we choose to ignore it, go to bed late, watch something that we're fascinated with on the TV, or force ourselves to stay up to complete something. Ideally, the best time to go to bed is before 10. So not sure whether that's doable for you, and to sleep something like 7 to 9 hours. In the ideal world, and hopefully in your world, that's what you're looking for. Another important part of reconnecting with your inner rhythm, particularly as women. And this is the term called emotional residue. Emotional residue is something that we take on. Women are conditioned, programmed, if you like, all of those things, all very true, to carry the weight of other people's stories and lives. We do that as mothers, we do that as co-workers, we do that as girlfriends, as lovers, as wives. And carrying the stories of other people's lives becomes a very detrimental thing, not just in the short term, but very much in the long term. One of my clients recently has been diagnosed with chronic fatigue. She's not excited about that label, and she does see it as a label. And so we did a little bit of exploration into her life. And in the last 2 years, she has experienced 2 brothers who've died, a lot of cancer in the family, and a lot of grief and anger and concern about how she's having to manage so many other people in her family, the emotional residue, and that in the last 6 months it's been particularly toxic for her. And so when we looked at all that, brought that out, and she knows all of this, but sometimes you have to just kind of lay it out a little bit for people to see. she was able to see, well, no wonder she was experiencing chronic fatigue. It made sense, and that it was time for her to put down the burden of other people's stuff, to put in place a clear boundary around self-care and self-value, because this is the foundational issue, that her self-value was just not there, not able to carry the notion of having boundaries, of being allowed to have boundaries. And so emotional residue is that thing that kind of seeps in and certainly affects not only a woman's daily energy capacity, but her capacity to respond and care for herself further down the track. So it's an accumulative burden. And this is one that I'm very, big about talking about, encouraging women to come back to their own sense of belonging and understanding their energy, rhythms, and so on, and how to reconnect with self. And so this then leads into the power of the pause. So with women suffering that weightiness of other people's lives, how do you then allow yourself to build in intentional pauses into your daily schedule, into your daily life? And this is important because it allows your nervous system to integrate any work or task that you've done before you move on to the next task. So, for instance, we're often taught that we should handle the big tasks first before we do the little ones. And I always find that a bit overwhelming. It's like, because often the big tasks is so big, there's so much in it, and then you have to chunk it down and all of that. That's going to take up most of your day. So I often like to do the small tasks first, because then there is that satisfaction in having completed that, and then the confidence of having done that, the green tick of confidence, before I then move into the next one. But nonetheless, however your approach is, big versus small, small versus big, allow yourself to complete your task and to give yourself a sense of done that, and a little pause, an intentional pause for accepting, acknowledging the completion, step away from the job, break state. Go outside if you can, breathe, do something different before you move back into whatever your task or work mode is. Because when you're doing something, a task that requires mind activity, there is a certain level of adrenaline and cortisol engaged. And that's why it's important for your nervous system to come down from that heightened state of activity to a more gentle, neutral fluctuation of nervous energy. And so when it comes to accepting tasks, there is this lovely way of how to say no with grace. So I love this word, grace. Grace is such a beautiful word, a little bit bound up with religiosity, and that's not a bad thing. But grace is a beautiful word. And my understanding of the word grace is a sort of soft kindness. It's more than that, though. It's kind of like a loving kindness, which is the Buddhist meaning, but that fits with grace. So you look it up, see what grace means for you and what you understand it to be. But saying no with grace, it's very much about having a boundary as well. And again, that's what we come back to. Boundaries as self-compassion. And shifting that perspective, if I say no, then that will seem rude and that's mean and I shouldn't say no to somebody. But if you remind yourself of what little children are like, they are constantly saying no. And that little 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, their no is building their understanding of. So we need to remind ourselves of our little toddler time, that saying no, but with grace, is really important to establish our sense of boundary and being in charge of this sovereign state of who we are. Because if you're not able to say no, then it reflects that your sense of value is very externally focused, or it's validated by others. And that's something that you need to consider and ask why that's so, and perhaps to do a little bit more work around that. So, negotiating your pace. This is a good one, and it's about how to tell a partner, a boss, or a friend that you're not up to the task today without sounding weak. Saying something like, "I'm feeling a bit slow today, so I'm not going to be able to continue this at this task. I'm going to need it a little bit more, do it a little bit more slowly." So play with the wording of that and see how that sounds to you. And more important, if someone were to say that to you, how would you react or respond to somebody saying that to you? And I think you would be surprised. That would seem like a reasonable thing to say. So play with that, negotiating your pace. And the other side of that is women receiving without guilt. And this is always such a big one, because women do find it difficult to hold boundaries because we think we're supposed to do it all. And gosh, it's liberating when we realize we don't. But nonetheless, this is another area that you need to be looking at in terms of how to say no. And one of the wonderful things about young women today, when I listen to young women and see their interactions and how they are saying no quite strongly and straight out, there's no softness around the wording, "Oh, I would if I could," or "maybe I shouldn't." None of that. It's just an outright no. And that brings such hope to women being able to recalibrate, reset the way in which they say no, learning from our beautiful younger daughters, young women around us as role models. So, coming to the end of this, the Graceful No scripts. I'd love to help, but I'm currently honouring a period of restoration so I can show up fully later. That may not be something that you would say, but it's kind of fun to play with. Or my capacity is full right now and I want to give this the energy it deserves, but I can't do that today. And so these are a little bit full-blown, but nonetheless idolized. And maybe you could say something much, much simpler. But I think you get the gist that it's okay to say no, and simply to say, "No, I'm not up to that today." With a good full voice, "I'm not up to that today. I'll get to that later." And something I heard, just to finish on that, was a woman in a business mode, and someone was about to interrupt her, and she said, when I finish speaking, then I'll listen. And that struck me with being an incredibly powerful and simple statement, with the then holding those two pieces together, really very purposeful. So I'm just going to say it again because I got a lot out of that. When I've finished speaking, then I'll listen. And that's what we need to do more of. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed listening.
You've been listening to the Healing Practice podcast with Claire Cleaver. If today's episode resonated, you're invited to continue the journey with Claire beyond the podcast. You'll find books, guided resources, workshops, and opportunities to work with Claire one-to-one at thehealingpractice.com.au. Whether you're seeking support, understanding, or a deeper connection to the season of life you're in, there's space there to explore at your own pace. Until next time, trust your body's wisdom, honour where you are, and move gently through the season you're living.